Attilio Di Camillo. He was a chess coach from Philly. Attilio from Filio, Philadelphia. Di Camillo was born May 28th, 1917. He passed away February 17th, 1962. So not very old, just before his 45th birthday. But evidence of his coaching was seen in the development of his students, such as Charles Calmy, you know that name. Saul Vox was another, and other chess masters who benefited from his instruction. Also Lisa Lane, not to be confused with Lois Lane, but Lisa was the United States women's champion. But Di Camillo did suffer from chronic physical disabilities and ailments, one of which resulted in a 3-week hospitalization, which ended in his death at age 44. All right, let's get on with the game. Bobby with knight f3. Once again, and I've said this before, in his youth, Bobby Fischer frequently played knight f3. He basically played King's Indian attack as white, King's Indian defense as black, or the Sicilian if his opponent played e4. So it wasn't till later that he adopted the mantra, pawn to king 4, best by test. All right, we have the black Mustang defense, which is what I most frequently play against Retis. d4. d4 is Mikėnas Defense. That's named for Vladas Mikėnas, who was a Lithuanian chess player and journalist. He was an international master, and he was given a meritorious grandmaster title. Mikėnas lived from April 1910 to November 1992. d5 transposes. As you can see now, this is nothing more than a d4, d5, Zucker-Tort Chigorin, all of a sudden. g3, though, and knight f6 does turn this back into a King's Indian attack. Bishop g2. Di Camillo, not wanting to go down that road, played e6. Makes this bishop bad. The book move is bishop f5, so you don't cage in your bishop. You can, after castles, then play e6. And then I think c4. Yes, and then bishop e7. Back, 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 back. e6 right away is a mistake. Bobby goes ahead and castles, and bishop e7 here. c4 is still played here. Pawn takes the pawn. Now queen a4. Bishop d7. Of course, pawn is going to be captured. He's not going to stay in line with that bishop. Knight a5 hits the queen. Yeah, castles is played a bit more frequently, or at least as frequently. Knight a5, queen back to c2, rook c8, knight c3, pawn c5, pawn takes the pawn, bishop takes the pawn. Pawn e4, getting the big yellow question mark. He should try knight e5. Here knight comes back to c6, but I thought knight c4 would be a better way. It at least keeps the balance, or not. It gives me an inaccuracy. What do I know? e5 here, knight b4, hits the queen. Queen d2, now knight to d5. a3, hits the knight. Knight takes knight here, pawn takes knight here. That's why you don't take this knight right away here, because then the knight comes back. So a takes b4. So bishop takes the b-man, and now pawn takes the knight, and bishop takes the pawn. It hits the queen. Queen slides to a2. The rook is captured. The bishop is captured. So we have a rook against bishop and knight, and black is compensated with 2 pawns here. But he really can't hold on to both of them because he needs to get castled, which he does right here. So Bobby grabs that pawn, not liked by the bot. Bishop c6 defends the other one. Bishop b5 might be called for here since it hits the rook. And after rook e1, then you can bring in your queen, say queen d3, or then defend your pawn. Okay. Well, bishop c6 was played. Bishop a3 hits the rook. Rook e8. Bishop d6. Nice outpost for that bishop. Rook a8. Queen e3. Rook a4. Knight d2 here. All right, here bishop takes the bishop. King takes the bishop. And now queen a5 was played. It's marked inaccurate, but there's nothing really wrong with it. Rook b1 hits this pawn. Queen d5 check. Defends and does so with tempo. Knight f3. Rook c8. Queen b6 is played right here. h6 here. Queen takes the pawn. Queen takes the queen. Rook takes the queen. Rook c2. He wants to get both rooks lined up right here. Rook b5. I'm not sure why it's calling for bishop b8 there. Anyway, rook a2 is played. The whole point of this move is so that he could defend with his bishop and not get captured. And that's what he plays here. So I don't know why rook b5 got a mistake. But again, we saw this earlier. The annotator is not always the most accurate in his annotations. Rook a b2 was played. Rook a5. Rook back to a2. Some grandmaster dancing to increment the move counter toward the satisfaction of the time control. Certainly rook takes rook would work here. And then after rook takes rook, push your pawn. Yeah. But the player's getting in a couple of extra moves to increment that move counter. Yeah, here you could trade rooks as well, obviously. Same thing, it's just different. Now he does trade rooks, and bishop d6 is played. Rook back to b2, knight to d4. Interesting imbalance here. Bishop and knight against a rook should be better. 2 pieces against 1. Rook a2, knight b3, rook a4. I don't know if he wants to start getting his pawns rolling over here. That gets a star. He would have to play also. Let's go back. Rook a4, knight c5, rook a2, knight d7. And by the way, h4 is available all the way through here. I've been saying that anywhere along here you can h4. Knight a7, rook a4. You could even, here it says rook c2, but yeah, you could be more aggressive and hit this knight. Anyway, knight back to c5. Again, some repetitions. h4 always available. Rook c4. Yeah, and even coming back to a2, it says rook a1, but even rook back to a2, same type of thing. Same comments everywhere in here. So you have the same kind of moves available, no matter how you go about it here. But rook c2, king f3, rook c3 check, king e4, rook c2, knight d3, defends this pawn, rook e2 check, king back to f3, rook back to c2. A lot of dancing around. h4 finally played here. Rook c3, king e4 here, rook c6. Here bishop c5 was played. Rook a6. Now pawn h5. Not like. Rook a4 check. Bishop d4. Rook a2. Pawn g4. Rook e2 check. Bishop e3. Rook back to a2. Pawn f4. Making little by little progress here. White is. Pawn g6. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Now knight c5, and that's going to prevent the rook from giving another check here while attacking this pawn. King f7 defends. Pawn f5 making the break now. Pawn takes the pawn. Pawn takes the pawn. Pawn takes the pawn. King takes the pawn. As you can see here, all black needs to do is win this pawn and then trade his rook for one of the 2 minor pieces, and the game's drawn. And the way to do that, well, he's got to save this pawn, though, doesn't he? He played h5. He should have played rook to h2, and then you can come up in here. So knight b7, for example, then check, and on king e4, king e6 is going to win that pawn, isn't it? Well, you could have knight c5 check. But h5 is not the way to go. Now knight e4, d6 check is looming. Rook a5 pins the pawn. Bishop g5, rook d5, knight f6, rook d1. Yeah, it's calling for rook b5, rook a5 even. Probably not much better either way. Bishop d2 will hit him there. But really what black is hoping for with this kind of a move, this lateral type of a move, he's hoping that white will blunder. Because again, we just take this, double exclam, thank you, just showing you how to draw here, and now you fork the 2 minor pieces and the game's drawn. So that's the idea behind keeping the rook here on this line. You hope that white captures the free pawn, and that draws the game. Rook d1. I got 2 double exclams tonight. So that allows knight takes the pawn. Well, yeah, e6 first. That's very decisive. That comes with check. All right, well, knight takes h5 was Bobby's play. Rook d5, knight back to f6, rook a5, knight e4, rook back to d5. The point here, black doesn't have any good moves. Like any move with the king isn't really going to do anything. We'll just change our tact. After king f8, king e6, making ground, rook d1, bishop e7 check, forces the king away now. Now king d7, and after rook a1, there must have been an adjournment or something. Either that or he played rook a1 and resigned. But typically when you see the losing side make a move and then resign, it's because the game was adjourned and not actually continued. So probably Bobby wrote a move down, maybe knight e8, for example, check. He sealed that move in an envelope. They went their separate ways, and before reconvening, Lombardi would have contacted the arbiter and said, I resign. Quite a game, quite a long haul game where Bobby just edged him out. It was competitive, but both players really accurate in the middle game, both with a decent enough end game, but Bobby had just squeezed out the edge. Their single game ratings were 2,700 for Bobby and 2,600 for Di Camillo. 93.6 accuracy for Fischer, 91.1 accuracy for Di Camillo. Really strong game.